We're going to be completing the hydroxide compound practical in this clip now. This is a demonstration of a precipitate reaction. So that's when we have two aqueous solutions which are mixed and a precipitate is formed, a precipitate being a solid. So in this set of experiments, we are adding sodium hydroxide, and hydroxide is bonding with the metal in the compound to form a precipitate on most occasions. So what we'll be doing, we'll be observing one, the colour of the solution to begin with. So the solution has a particular colour, and then we'll be observing the precipitate, which may or may not be formed. It normally is formed, but not always. So the precipitate is insoluble in the finished solution. Okay, so we'll start off with copper sulfate. So what we're looking for here is, wondering if copper will bond with the hydroxide to form a precipitate. So the copper is the one we're testing for in this. So I'll put a couple of drops of copper into the spotting tray here, copper sulfate. You can see there the colour of that solution. You can record that down in your results table. And now we've got sodium hydroxide, and I'll just get a couple of drops of that and we'll see what happens. 1, 2, straight away there we have a precipitate forming. So that is a solid, that is a precipitate. You just need to record your observations of what that looks like. Describe the colour, describe the texture as best you can. Moving along now, we're going to test magnesium sulfate. So again, I'll put a couple of drops of magnesium sulfate into the spotting tray. Note down the colour of the solution. And now we'll add some sodium hydroxide. Okay, not too sure if you can see that. Just a really faint sort of cloudy precipitate being formed there. Moving along to iron 2 sulfate, or ferrous sulfate. A couple of drops into here. So noting the colour of the solution there. And again, just adding a couple of drops of sodium hydroxide. Right, significant change in colour there and a really defined precipitate formed there. Please record the colour. Now, iron 3 chloride. Iron 3 chloride or ferric chloride. Again, just record the colour of the solution. Adding the sodium hydroxide. Yet again, another precipitate has been formed. Record the colour of that precipitate. And lastly, we have potassium sulfate. So checking the colour of potassium to see if that forms a precipitate. So potassium sulfate, bit of sodium hydroxide, and really there was no precipitate formed in that example. So for potassium sulfate, when potassium hydroxide is formed, the potassium hydroxide is soluble, so there's no precipitate formed. Thank you for watching. You can always replay that and just check your results and make sure that you've got an accurate set of results.